General observations uh, for the condition of the economy in relation to political leadership and other leadership, religious and non governmental, its interaction in terms of efficiency uh, and productivity, uh, coupled with detrimental factors such as organized crime, corruption, and uh, lack of efficiency in uh, taxation, along with the use of funds. So, my first observation would be that, or the in primacy would have to be uh, security, because when you have levels of corruption that supersede the amount of freedom that's in a society, you then have uh, the inability to govern that society with its own rules, because organized crime, corruption, and political corruption use the public's inability to be there for every decision and for every judgment against them. So if you have a lack of integrity in the political system, it leaves itself open for uh, corruption. And when you have an overabundance of crime, they work themselves into, just like political influence, to have their way, and you have a breakdown of economies. Now, uh, and corruptions. You have a push towards socialism, because centralized power occurs more frequently, as you've seen in Nazism and fascism and communism, under the guise of the people. You get that exploitation of the lack of inability of the mass to access the amount of information that it takes to make you to keep societies free. So in the name of freedom, they lock themselves into cages, because um, it seems the right thing to do. However, freedom and free economies have provided the most amount of not only economic freedom, but uh, spiritual freedom. The ability to live your life, the way you want, you know, in terms of your religious choices, and not having the state force itself upon you. So, in order to decrease these maleficent forces, crime and political corruption, you have to have, um, you know, you have to strike at at their their sources of power, which is money and uh, and information, the ability to bully, and intimidate, and you need money to do that. And so, if you have a huge black market, then you allow them the funds to control. But if you legalize marijuana and only the things that wouldn't be detrimental to a society, you can't have, like, substances like cocaine or methamphetamine, be legal. But you'd have less of a market for cocaine and methamphetamine. You can minimize it, and because of the cultural shift that you'd have, by the lack of such a strong black market, you would have an increase in tax revenue and different things like that, you could, you know, there would be a cultural shift. You wouldn't have, you know, people pushing cocaine and methamphetamine to the degree, or heroin, you know, or other substances that are, you know, good for medical use, controlled medical use, but not, you know, for general public use, um, as much, because they wouldn't have the foundation to be able to, you know, intimidate once again and bully and push, you know, on the per capita level, you know, on the individual level as much. Um, so that's one way that you could lessen, you know, the influence of corruption, because corruption starts with money, and it goes and tries to influence itself. Now you have corporate corruption. You know, uh, you should have an equal tax base for every type of activity. You know, um, and uh, you shouldn't overtax people, because that's usury. It's their money. You know, and the government shouldn't be wasteful in its endeavors, which, you know, some say, well, it's hard to determine what's wasteful, what's not wasteful, but really isn't. Anything that has to do with security and, let's say, the rules of business, that should be government run. Okay, uh, they're the refs, but they're not the players, and they've become the players, which means that we have a top-heavy, you know, government-run economy instead of a government-run economy. You know, all it should be is, okay, this is wrong. You cannot exploit people. You cannot, but you should let the free market push that. Now, if you have, uh, you know, companies that are not paying their people competitively, the market will work that out, because people will leave that company. So the prices set themselves, but also the wages set themselves. And this way, people get paid, you know, in relation to the amount of profits that the company is taking in competitively, which keeps the company working competitively, because a happy worker is a happy company. A happy company produces good things. You know, a motivated worker. And in the same way, you know, is for you know, the hiring corporate salaries and wages can be really high and great if the company's making a lot of money and you have it, you know, competitive and set competitively. But what you have now is that it's so hard to move companies, to move from one company to the next. You've got labor unions and different things like that basically own you, because they make it, you know, impossible to fire you, which lowers, you know, the productivity, increases, you know, the mentality of us versus them, and makes it for, you know, it's harder to have the kind of cohesiveness that ingenuity springs from. When you have cohesiveness, then you have, you know, proper channels for ingenuity to to thrive. You know, when you have a good um, relation with your employees, then you have all their ideas. You have a you know, means by which they can work not just their job but their career. You know, and so, you know, our number one resource is people, and we have to criminalize any act that destroys people, you know, from their wages to their life. You know, our Constitution defends life, and the real primacy of any society is to protect its citizens. You know, to give them freedom and to give them life, to allow them to live. And in the name of freedom, we're destroying life. Each embryo has its own DNA strand from conception. And so it should have its own unique rights, no matter what its the circumstances of its conception should allow it rights, individual rights. And if you have that, not only if you have that, and then if you have, fair tax bases and non or if you have detrimental black markets, if you cancel those, okay, if you give people the right to life, no matter what the status of their inception, you'll have all the people that you need. And with a nice tax, which I can tell you more about the tax, but with a nice tax and the ability to give, you'll have all the people that you need to support old people, people who can't afford their medical to the extreme degree. It all works. But when you have people that would rather do what's easy than what's right, what's popular than what's right, or are easily swayed by intimidation, or they have a thirst for power that leaves them open to any old thing, then you can't have that. And the way that starts is with a foundation. What is the most important thing to you? Doing what's right? Taking care of other people as if they were you? Or stepping all over people to get where you want to go? In that way, you end up stepping on yourself immediately, because the consequences of selfish acts are immediately upon you, though you're not experiencing them, immediately. And in the long term, because eventually they do catch up to you, and corporately, as we've seen in if you look at the numbers of America and the world, we don't have enough young people, and our economies are overwrought with corruption, and the common working man, you see it in Spain and in different places. They don't have jobs. They don't have jobs, and they don't have any, they lack, the pride of life, and that's a shame. And so, that's my first observation in general.